High school was 4 of the greatest years in my life. Things were so much simpler back then than they currently are. Now I am 25 years old with 6 years of service in the Navy, and looking back those times seems so long ago. I always reminisce on all the good times I had with my friends. We were a close group, always getting together after school or going out on the weekends. My head swells with so many fond memories I've had with them, so many great memories. Except one memory that, when I think back to it, still sends a chill down my spine. It was our senior year, 2008, and graduation was just around the corner. We were all excited to be moving ahead with our lives. I was joining the military and the rest were going to different colleges. I will admit it was a bittersweet moment. Yes, we were excited for the future, but a bit sad knowing our group would not be whole like it was throughout high school. My friends decided they were going to give me an awesome going-away celebration. The plan was to pitch in some money and have my older brother rent us a cabin in the mountain for the weekend. We packed our bags and drove up the mountain to the cabin. There was a small town nearby, and our cabin was about half a mile down the road. There were a few other cabins nearby, but ours was at the edge of town surrounded by woods. We unpack our things and head inside. We were not disappointed. The living dining room was enormous with a big L-shaped couch and a long table with plenty of chairs. We had a good-sized television and even a pool table. There were 3 separate bedrooms down the hall with 2 beds each. There were 7 of us, so I volunteered to sleep on the couch. I didn't really care, it was comfy as hell anyways. The only problem I had was that the couch was next to this sliding glass door that for some reason had no blinds or drapes. I was not about to admit to everyone that it bothered me. As soon as we were unpacked, we decided to get the good times started. My brother and a couple others went into town to buy alcohol and food while the rest of us prepared for the night's festivities. We ate, we drank, played some drinking games like beer pong, which I was never good at, and had a good time. Later that evening, we were all gathered in the living room talking about funny moments we had had in high school. We were all feeling pretty good from all the alcohol consumption. As I was telling one of my stories, we heard a female friend of mine shriek, "Oh my God!" It startled the shit out of us, and we quickly turned our heads to her, standing in front of the sliding glass door. She quickly turns around with the biggest smile and says, "You guys, it's snowing!" We all run to the window like children, and sure enough, there is a good amount of snow falling from the sky. We go outside, and as the snow builds up, we have a good snowball fight and build ourselves a crappy snowman. After a while, we get tired and go inside. Running around in our lack of sobriety caused a couple of my friends to puke. It was late, and we all decided to turn in for the night. We had planned to buy a sled in town and find a snowy hill in the morning. We all went to our rooms and fell asleep. I was awoken in the middle of the night to what I thought was a stick or branch cracking in the distance. I laid there for a few minutes, trying to see if I heard it again, or if it was just my imagination. Nothing. I told myself I was hearing things. I got up to drink a bottle of water. I did not want to wake up the next morning with a nasty hangover. As I walked by the sliding glass door, I looked outside. Snow was still falling, just not as much, and the moon gave the snow an eerie blue glow. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. As I drank, I got lost in my thoughts. I was going to miss times like these with my friends. Did I make the right decision joining the military? I was contemplating my future when I was suddenly snapped back into reality by the sound of crunching. I listened, trying to figure out what exactly that sound was. It slowly got louder, then stopped. Then it slapped me in the face. Footsteps! Footsteps in the snow! I immediately turned my head to the sliding glass window. My heart skipped a beat. A shock of pins and needles ran down my skin. There at the sliding glass window was a dark silhouette of a man. His right hand was cupped around his eyes and he was peering in, surveying the living room. I was frozen, confused, wondering who this was looking in. He must not have seen me, for He was still moving his head, looking around. It was only when he lifted his left hand and cupped it around the other side of his face that my confusion turned to horror. In his left hand, he held a hatchet. I just stood there and watched as he looked inside. He put his hands down and looked down to his right towards the door handle and began reaching for it. That's when I noticed it, and my heart stopped. In our drunken stupidity, we forgot to lock the door when we came back inside from playing in the snow. I panicked when his hand gripped the door handle. "Can I help you?" I said loudly, trying to sound intimidating, but clearly sounding scared. It startled the man, for he quickly looked up in my direction. We stared at each other for what seemed like hours, but were merely seconds. I could not see his face, but I could feel his eyes piercing my soul. He let go, slowly backed away, and started jogging away. He didn't break eye contact with me until he was a good 15 feet from the cabin. One of my friends who woke up to my shouting came to the living room and asked who I was talking to and why I was standing in the dark. I locked the door in a hurry, and he could tell there was something wrong. He looked out the glass door and caught a glimpse of the man a second before he disappeared into the woods. "What the hell is that?" I woke everyone up and told them what happened. We were all shitting bricks. Needless to say, we all decided to nope the fuck out of there the next morning, and none of us were going to sleep the rest of the night. As we left the next morning, hundreds of thoughts ran through my head. What if I didn't sleep in the living room? If there was nobody there with the door left unlocked, what could have happened? What were his intentions with that hatchet? We'll never know, and it's sad to say that my last memory together with my friends was a horrible one. It was the summer of 2020. I can't remember if it was June or July, but COVID shut the world down and traveling wasn't an option unless you had a car and your destination was outside somewhere. My family loves the outdoors, so we wanted to go to a place we haven't been before that gave us the option for outdoor activities. My mom suggested we go to Yosemite and take the Hetch Hetchy Trail so we could see where our water was coming from. We live in the San Francisco Bay Area near the Crystal Springs Reservoir, which gets its water from this part of Yosemite, and thought it would be fun to see the source. She found a cabin located in a nearby forest on Airbnb so we could be close to the national park, and it was very cute in the pictures, so we booked it and left a few days later. The cabin was even cuter in person. My brother and I went upstairs and looked at the 2 bedrooms. One had 2 twin beds, and the other had a queen. We figured we would be sharing the room with the 2 beds, so we entered it and picked which bed we wanted. The room was rectangular and had a tall, slanted ceiling with a section cut out for a vertical window to the left on the wall opposite from the door. In the cutout section, in front of the window was a tall lamp standing at about 5'7". I picked the bed to the left of the door that was facing the lamp and window, and my brother picked the bed on the opposite side of the room that was facing my bed. That night we didn't do very much. I played Animal Crossing for hours while my brother scrolled through his phone until it was time to go to bed. Before summer started, my brother and I got prescribed sleep medication, Ambien to be exact. Since COVID made life boring, this was also the summer that my brother and I were using our dab pens. Weed, if you don't know, every night once it hit 10:30 p.m., and the combination of the two made the night very fun for us before we passed out. If you don't know what Ambien is, it is a hypnotic sleep drug that warps your perception of reality and memories of that night. Some people eat out of the trash can, others cover their countertops in peanut butter. If you want to read other examples, go check out our Ambien. The following day, we went on the trail, and it was amazing, but also very hot, so we were exhausted by the time we got home. We had dinner, everything was going according to our schedule, and at the end of that night at 10:30 p.m., my brother and I followed our nighttime drug routine and eventually laid down to fall asleep. This is where it got weird. I turned to my left so I was facing the wall and away from my brother. My eyes were heavy and I was blinking myself to sleep, but right before I closed my eyes to fully fall asleep, I noticed something dark at the foot of my bed. The room was dark, but the window had no curtain, so there was a bit of light shining into the room from the moon. I opened my eyes a little wider to focus on the shape and saw that it was a tall silhouette of something that had what looked like a head. It slowly glided to the right of the bed and out of my line of sight, and I was very curious as to what it was doing. I didn't take any of this seriously because I had convinced myself I was imagining things due to the drugs I was using, even though neither had ever made me hallucinate before, but I still turned my body to lie on my back. I didn't open my eyes fully because I was a little bit spooked since, drugs or not, dark figures in your room are things you see in horror movies. My eyes were lightly cracked open so I could see, but closed enough to look like I was still sleeping. That's when I looked directly at a black, opaque, and faded around the edges thing, almost like a shadow you can't see through. It was bent over my bed at a 90-degree angle directly over my face. I would say I was making eye contact with it, but it had no eyes. My eyes opened a little wider, and I think it noticed me noticing it because it stood up straight and moved away quickly behind the lamp. It did not walk, it glided, and as it glided towards the lamp, its height shrunk about half a foot, and it crouched behind the lamp as if it was trying to hide. I stared at it, immobilized by fear. It was crouching behind the lamp while it grasped the pole, and finally I was able to move and decided that was enough for the night and that I just needed to go to sleep. So I turned back to my side, facing the wall, and fell asleep. I woke up the next morning and asked my brother if he had seen anything weird that night. I told him about the black figure and his eyes opened wide, and he said he saw her too. Now, before talking to him, I didn't know it was a woman. I had just seen the figure of a person-like thing. I told him everything I had seen before I went to bed, and then he told me his point of view. He was laying there on his bed that faced my bed, and he had opened his eyes to see a dark figure bent at a 90-degree angle over me, next to the side of my bed. Then he saw it straighten up and shrink/glide/crouch behind the lamp. He noticed I hadn't reacted, thinking I had still been asleep, so he closed his eyes and turned his body away from the lamp, trying to go to sleep because it couldn't have been real. That's when the floorboard started to creak. Keep in mind at this point I was asleep, so I didn't hear or see any of this. He said it sounded like the floor was creaking closer and closer to him, not like footsteps, but if there was even pressure making its way towards his bed. He kept his eyes closed and his back facing the sounds, when all of a sudden he heard a quiet, "Hey," coming from behind him. He froze and tried to ignore it. Another, yet slightly louder, "Hey," was said. That's when he could tell it was a woman's voice. He was still frozen in fear and didn't move a muscle. He waited a few seconds before he heard the drawer of the nightstand being played with, so he mentally counted down from 10 before opening his eyes and turning to look in the direction of the noise. Nothing was there. After we had told each other our points of view from that night, we rushed downstairs to the kitchen where our parents were making breakfast. My brother and I love haunted, scary, and horror-related things, so with a hint of excitement alongside the fear, we told them the cabin was haunted. "Stop saying things like that. This place is not haunted and you're not scaring anyone," was our dad's response. He doesn't believe in anything that is mystic supernatural and definitely doesn't believe in ghosts. He is always the first to dismiss these things and thinks there is always an explanation. Our mom dismissed our haunted accusation as well, with a simple, "No, it's not." My brother and I tried to explain more, and they weren't listening until my brother said the word, "woman." The second that word left his mouth, my mom dropped the spatula she was using for the eggs on the stove and looked directly at us, and the color drained from her face. This was followed by her saying, "A woman tried to wake me up last night while I was sleeping." My brother and I turned to each other and just looked at each other in shock, now that our experiences were being confirmed by someone who had not taken any drugs. We left the cabin later that day to return home, and it was never spoken of again until later in the year when my brother and I tried to talk to our mom about it, wanting to talk about ghost experiences. She acted like it never happened. She chose to repress that memory, but my brother and I choose to relive it every now and then by telling people who haven't heard the story before. It sounds much better when we tell it together because our points of view paint the whole picture, but to this day it still gives me chills, thinking about its eyeless dark face right in front of mine. I've had a few other strange experiences, but this one was the weirdest since it was originally confirmed by 3 people, including myself. I intend to go back to Yosemite again, but I'm sure as hell staying away from that cabin and anyone near it.